Hello and welcome to Bright Talk. I'm Deb Calvert and this is the Deb Calvert channel on Bright Talk. I really appreciate that you've joined me here today. For anyone who's new to Bright Talk, let me just give you an overview of some of the features here. First of all, if there are any issues that you encounter technically, go ahead and click the button that says Get Live Support Now, because the chat feature that opens and the folks there at Bright Talk are going to do a much better job for you than I can during the live presentation on getting those issues worked out. If you have any questions, though, for me, please post those. I really welcome those questions from you. If you post those, I'll answer them when it makes sense in the presentation or at the end. Or if you post one at the very end, I'll try to come back to that and answer it via email. And if you're listening in on demand, I welcome your questions. Connect with me over there on LinkedIn. Send me an email, whatever works for you, and we'll make sure to get your question answered. At the end of the presentation, I really appreciate your reviews. Just drop any comments there for me, anything you'd like me to do differently in future presentations. I welcome your input. And most importantly of all, one of the things you'll want to be sure to notice here on Bright Talk is that there's a place where you can get bonus content. And I've loaded that up. So the attachments and links button that you see, that one is the place to go to get the special offer that I'll be making for you today, as well as some other tools that you can use. As long as we're talking about that special offer, let me just tee it up. There are actually two different types of manager training that you can access beyond this webinar. The first one is basic management. It's not so much about sales management, but it is a DIY, online, just-in-time tool that you can use. And you can use it all at once, or you can come back to it as you need to. It's self-paced. It's an e-learning tool. That one is available. But here's the offer for sales managers, and it is exclusively for active sales managers. I am going to be offering this presentation today, plus 11 more, throughout 2019 in a series. And if you'll listen to all 12 of the presentations in this series, plus come in for a couple hours of executive coaching on the issues that you need to work on, plus download and use the tools that are not available through the webinar, some additional tools, well, you can do that. And if you do that, you'll earn a certificate, a People First Management certificate exclusively for sales managers. And the first 12 people who take advantage of that offer are going to get all of that at no cost at all. So there's information in the attachments about how you can do that too. Okay, so here's a little bit of information about me so you know who you're talking to. I've done a few things here and there in sales, written a couple of books, done a lot of training. I'm a field researcher, which means I spend a lot of time in field with managers and with salespeople. And I hope that we'll connect over on LinkedIn. I hope we'll get a chance to get to know each other better. All right, let's dive into what you came for today. The title of today's presentation is How to Manage Sales and Lead People. And that's really a title for the entire series too, because we're going to be talking today about the philosophy behind that title, about putting people into the mix and your leadership into the mix. And I'm going to show you the business case for why to do that in today's presentation. Now, I know that your job, the job of a sales manager or sales director or sales VP, I know without doubt that you have one of the most demanding jobs there is. No contest. If you make some comparisons, other functional area managers and directors, well, they have fewer constituents. And you, on the other hand, you have constant accountabilities to your direct reports, your boss, your customers, and your peers, plus support team members and probably community groups and corporate folks. And not only that, it's sales that's always under the microscope. It's sales that everybody's asking about. And it's sales that is the engine driving what happens throughout every other part of the business. And not only that, but you are constantly bombarded with new technology, new strategies, and new ideas for how to make more sales. And while that's better, having all those options is better than the alternative, even so, it can certainly be overwhelming. And then we have to add to the complexity of your job because you are probably dealing with a whole lot of jobs that aren't even your own. Maybe you're also doing a lot of things over and over again, like recruiting, hiring, and onboarding, and working hard to retain those sellers who are on your team. And there's a great deal of time and expense and lost opportunity involved in that work, which only adds to the pressure of your role. And every time you're successful in what you do, well, it's time to start all over again. Let's talk about this idea, though, that the lines between your job and other people's jobs can often become a bit blurred. Because if you're like most sales managers, you're probably doing your own work and the work of other people too. This graphic on screen, it's also available as a download over there in the attachments. You can just go over there and download it. You can probably read it better once you print it out for yourself. But the graphic, it might surprise you a little bit. You'll notice that red means stop, green means go, and yellow means to proceed with caution. And I understand you might strongly disagree with what you're seeing here, especially with that big red circle that says to stop selling. But I'd like you to consider this. As a sales manager, the work you're doing to close deals and to open sales and to cover vacant territories, that work isn't scalable. You are only one person. You can't possibly do it all. Every time you step in to do selling work, you're actually hindering growth. Sure, you might make a sale and you might see those dollars going to this month's revenue goal, but then you have to do it again next month and the next month. And there's this whole snowball effect. Instead, you could be thinking long term. And if you're thinking long term, what you need are sellers on your team who are better able to confidently, capably, competently, and consistently do what you do in selling. And they can't get there. They won't get there as long as you're doing it for them. And that's why your time is much better spent in the green areas. Those are the parts of your job that are people development activities. You're always going to be right where you are today until you get better at and until you spend more time on the activities in the green slices. This is what we're going to be working on most in this program. And this is what will boost employee retention. It's what's going to boost sales productivity. But to make this happen, you'll also have to become more selective about all those yellow slices. And you'll need to find ways to let other people pick up the slack and do the work that frankly, they're probably more qualified than you are to do. That could mean different things in different companies, different places where you work. It could mean, for example, that you'd be enlisting the help of human resources folks to do more of the pre-candidate screening for sales professionals. Or it could mean that you get senior management more involved in the reporting and the forecasting. It might even mean that you give up some of those reports and updates entirely. And I know that's like slaughtering a sacred cow, but there are things in every sales manager's company that other people could be doing, and you have to figure out in your organization for you what are those things, because you will never be as effective as you could be if you're losing a lot of time out there in those yellow slices of the pie. Now, when you try to do all those things for all those people, what's really happening is that you're impairing your own ability to be successful long term. and you're limiting the growth of the people who rely on you for professional development and to be able to make decent commission checks. You are not building the business when you're trying to be all and do all for yourself. So for those who are listening here live, I'd like to do a little temperature check. I'd like to know your reaction, your response to what I've just said. So if this is ringing true for you, go ahead and give me a comment. Use the question box and give me a little comment or something that I can build on. If what I've just said is shocking and seems absolutely impossible for you, I'd like to know that too. So go ahead and put your comments there. And for those of you who are listening on demand and don't have a chance to contribute during the live presentation, that's okay. I still want to know. I hope that you'll message me over on LinkedIn or somehow get in touch with me to let me know what you think about this notion of staying in the green boxes more often. And I appreciate those of you who are putting those comments in here for me. I'm going to respond to every one of them. As you're finishing up that work and posting those comments, let me continue. I'm going to show you why I've come to this conclusion that you really need to spend a lot more time in the green slices. What I'm showing you now, this comes from a really good resource that I highly recommend for organizations who are trying to build their bench strength and retain their top talent. This is from a book called The Leadership Pipeline. It's written by Ram Charan. And in that book, the author describes what he calls passages from one job level to the next. And he concludes that there are three big areas of change that must be made at each passage from one job level to the next. See, all too often, not just in sales, but in all kinds of jobs, we take a next level job, but then we keep relying on the same skills that worked for us in the previous role. Or we might not understand how our time should be more appropriately allocated in the new job. And in his research, the author's research, few people recognized what it was that was really valued in the work they were supposed to be doing after making this job passage. So let me explain what you're looking at. Each of the places where there's an intersection, an X on this graphic, represents a passage from one job level to the next. As a sales professional, a frontline seller, you managed yourself. That's the first line at the bottom. And then you became a sales manager. That was a passage. And as a sales manager, you manage others. So that's the next line. Moving up, as a sales director, you'll manage managers. As a functional manager, you might manage the entire sales function. And above that role, depending on the kind of organization you're in, there would be a general manager or a chief operating officer or a CEO, regional executives, corporate executives. Those are all examples of the top levels that are represented here. And every single one of these passages requires different skills, different priorities for how your time is spent, and different expectations and value that's placed on the work that you do. So let's take each of those in turn. Right? Being good at a role where you're managing yourself is usually a prerequisite for getting a promotion to the next level role of managing or influencing others. So I'm talking now about the light blue column on the left, that's a seller. The green column just to the right of that, that's a sales manager. And your boss, presumably, is in the next box, the yellow box. Now, it's sort of confusing because if being good at a role where you manage yourself is a prerequisite for getting a promotion to the next level role of managing and influencing others, well, it just begs the question, if we're promoted for being good at one thing, why wouldn't we keep doing that thing that got us promoted? And then it's even more confusing in sales because sales managers get paid for exactly the same thing that the sales professionals are paid for, making sales. The commission component, if you have one, of a sales manager's job certainly suggests that you should be out there selling. And I'll bet for some of you, that there are those kinds of messages and pressures inside the organization too. But that's actually a symptom of short-term thinking. And it's also the root cause of stagnating sales for a lot of organizations. When sales managers make a successful passage and develop the skills that are shown in the green column, skills like coaching and giving feedback and delegating and selecting and retaining good people, then there is no need for those sales managers to keep selling. The skills in the second column have to be mastered in any management role where the person in that role is not getting the work done through other people. The person occupying that role isn't managing, but instead is doing the work that needs to be done by people in the blue column. And I know that might sound a little harsh, but it's true. And if you don't recognize the difference, it could be because you've never seen it in action. Generally speaking, there's a widespread lack of sales management, and most sales managers have never received solid training on how to do the work of managing, which is why I've decided to offer this series. Now, you may notice that the skills in the sales manager column are all about building people, but I don't want you to misunderstand. This isn't about some sort of kumbaya luxury that comes after the sales are in the bank. This is actually a business imperative. It's about building the business and building your sales by building people. The only way to grow business and to scale a business for growth is by having highly competent people on your sales team who will do excellent work in column 1 so you don't have to. Now, as you look at the two columns over on the right, the yellow and purple ones, that's where you're going to see the work of sales directors and VPs. And I've grouped all those higher level roles in the last column because, well, there are fewer changes and there are less dramatic changes in those passages. One more thing I want to point out while we're here on this slide about skills requirements. The researcher, the author, Ram Charan, he says that a breakdown in the passage between the first and second column is generally indicative of somebody over there in the third column not holding managers accountable for doing managerial work. And this does happen at times. I see it in sales organizations because it's tempting. It's really tempting to focus a sales manager on the work of selling when the numbers aren't there or when there's a vacant territory, an open position. Your sales directors and VPs, they may themselves be products of environments where sales managers always did the work of frontline sales professionals, so they don't know what they don't know, and that's why they're not asking for anything different. But the reason why you want to do things differently is because you are only one person and you can't be all places at all times to handle all sales. That may represent a seismic shift for some of you, but it's one that's worth making for the health of your business, the success of your sales team, and your own career success and growth too. Now remember, I said skills are just one of the three big changes to make with each one of those passages. So let's look at the next one, which is how time is allocated in the work that you do. Now, Sharon's broad summary statements here, they do include meeting the deadlines of sales quotas on time each period. And of course, that's the primary expectation we have of our sellers. So once again, it gets a little muddy, a little bit of gray area here when we think about how you, as a sales manager, are also measured. But if you look at the critical shifts in how your time should be allocated, still keeping you in the green column, this is about how you should be allocating and managing your time when you want to make sure to be getting the work done through other people. So you're going to notice a few things. First, there's a shift from, here and now, short-term focus to longer-term planning. And second, there's the introduction of spending time on bigger impact projects. And finally, we have half of the bullets in this green column very specifically related to building people, to managing and getting work done through other people by being there for them, not doing their work for them, but being there to help them learn and grow and succeed in their own right. Something else I want to point out to you. You'll notice that a few of the words that appear on the previous slide, coaching and communicating, were shown as critical skills for sales managers. And now they're showing up in the third column as primary ways that time needs to be allocated at higher levels. In other words, with each passage, you continue to use what you learned and you apply it in different ways. You do it in different ways and with clarity of roles and responsibilities. Interesting that it says coaching. What that really says is that in most organizations, most functional areas, coaching is needed for managers, and that's true. But we all know there's an exception in sales. Yes, of course, you as sales managers, you do need and you benefit from coaching, but it's also true that your sales people, the frontline sellers, unlike people in most other frontline roles, your sales professionals, they also need coaching. And that's because they are, in essence, they're managing and influencing buyers. And coaching is that bridge that helps them to do this work more effectively. Okay, let's keep working on this. The third passage that we want to talk about, when you make any passage, the third thing that you need to make note of is how there's certain value placed on the work that you do. It's all about getting results through others. It's all about measuring your success by the success of the people who report to you. You're still in the second column. Now it's showing up in blue. This is about doing managerial work. That's the work for people in your job role that has the greatest value to your company, even more than making the sales yourself, because that's short term. And you're going to notice right away that the folks in column 3, they still bear the responsibility for this, for setting you up, making sure you have the tools and the time and the skills needed to be an effective manager. But if they're not doing that for any reason, it doesn't exonerate you of your responsibility here. It might make it a little tougher, but if you want to be successful in the work you do, if you want to succeed as a sales manager and set yourself up on a career track that is for next level positions, you'll still have to acquire and master the skills, know how to spend the time, and understand the value that's placed on the work you do in this role. And here's why all of this matters so much. What I'm showing you now are the top 4 reasons that people, including salespeople, leave their jobs. Number 5 on the list is the amount of pay they make, but these are 4 reasons that show up as higher than the need to make more money. As you're scanning these, you'll probably notice that they all have one thing in common. They all point back to the manager. Let me tell you a little bit about this research and how it was conducted. This comes from Gallup. They've been doing this research for decades, and every year since they started this, the result has been the same. So what you're getting exposed to is the standard exit interview. Someone is leaving your company and they either have an exit interview with HR or they turn in their resignation letter to you. They somehow communicate to you that they're leaving because they found a better paying job. So we assume, especially in sales, we assume that that's what caused them to go looking for a job, was that they needed to make more money. But Gallup took a different approach. Gallup asks employees who have recently taken new jobs, they ask them what it was that first caused them to go looking for a different job in the first place. And it turns out that the actual need to make more money was the fifth most common response. All four of the reasons you see on screen, these were the reasons that were given more frequently as prompting that job search. These four employee needs are going to be addressed by using tools and techniques I'll give you yet today and throughout this 12-part series. They're going to help you to boost retention because you'll be building up people skills for setting clear expectations, for communicating what it takes to be successful, for helping people see how they can develop themselves in their own careers, and for giving them regular feedback and coaching. All of that is embedded in this series. The big takeaway I want you to see here and now is that you, as the sales manager, you are responsible for employee retention and job satisfaction. And you won't get that by doing the work for them, by lightening their load or by protecting them from aggressive quotas or by adopting any kind of S-them approach that demonstrates you're on the seller's side. No, none of those tactics are going to help with retention. It's what you see on screen, and it's what I showed you in the previous 3 slides about your skill levels, the way you spend your time, and the value that's placed on your work. It's making those shifts that will help you build commitment and keep people engaged and on the team. And that's actually what we're aiming for here when we talk about the work of a manager. As squishy and as unbusinesslike as that may sound, emotional commitment to the job, the company, the team, and to you is vitally important. And the activities and the attributes that you bring, that's what's going to influence the levels of commitment that your sales professionals will have. Now, I can anticipate some of your objections here, so I just want to preempt them by saying, no, this commitment that I'm talking about, it will not happen because of money alone, not even with sales, not even because you're a sales manager working with salespeople. And that might surprise you to learn that money is not enough to compensate for a lack of emotional commitment that comes from getting performance feedback and clarity about what it takes to be successful. So all those efforts you might have been making to squeeze a few extra commission dollars into the plan won't go nearly as far as time spent coaching and working with people so they improve their performance. This little factoid on screen, it comes from a broader study that included salespeople and others. And I know you might still be skeptical, you might still be thinking it's different for salespeople, but I have to tell you, they are not as money motivated as you might think. So here's a little data that's a bit more directed to sellers. And while it might have been true way back when, a million years ago when I was a salesperson, sellers have changed. And sellers today do have different priorities. And for those of you who are still thinking, yeah, but the very best salespeople, those are the ones, they must still be money motivated. So please note that this study from OMG, Objective Management Group, this sorted the most and the least successful salespeople and found no difference whatsoever in the levels of money motivation. So we have to look at this a little bit differently. Now, we already know from Gallup that there are 4 reasons people leave their jobs before pay. And all 4 of those have to do with the interactions they have with their managers that will help them be more successful. We also know that people, salespeople included, want to feel appreciated and need to have positive, productive relationships with their managers, which is why it's so important to put people first and to lead people even as you manage sales. So research tells us, there's all kinds of research out there that tells us what sales professionals want and need from sales managers. And it's no different than what people want and need in other functional areas. So here are 6 things. I showed you 3 on the previous slide. Here are 3 more that drive people's feelings of workplace satisfaction and that cause them to want to stay with an organization and a manager. 3 of the 6 are linked to a manager conveying a positive outlook about the employee. And this is all coming from a workplace culture study that aligns quite nicely with that Gallup study. So Gallup tells us why people leave. This study adds dimension to show us the emotional impact when a manager does or does not, either way, coach, manage performance, give feedback, and help people understand what it takes to be successful. So let me do another tie back here. Think about what you might inadvertently be signaling every time you step into, let's say, to close a sale. I mean, sure, the sellers on your team, they might be relying on you or inviting you to do that. But agreeing to do it, being a mercenary closer, it suggests that you don't have confidence that they can do it on their own. It's not conveying that you have faith in them. And when you do that, you're not communicating a vision that's inspiring to them, because doing it for them is nothing more than a single sale made. You're trading the short-term gratitude and heroism for what would otherwise become long-term self-sufficiency and emotional commitment. Okay, now about those other three drivers of workplace morale. Turns out you're kind of responsible for these two. In a sense, you are the gatekeeper. You decide who knows about and gets access to career prospects. So if you only talk about the work and the numbers and the short term, you're not showing people what's possible for their future. And your messages make links to meaningful contributions and the profound impact sales professionals can have. Or they don't, if you are only talking about making the numbers. And then there's your reinforcement and support of any training that's offered. That's what makes it appealing and presents it as an opportunity, unless you're not reinforcing and supporting it and sending accidental messages that devalue it because it's encroaching on making sales today. Now, I realize this is starting to sound pretty negative. I want to assure you that I deeply admire and respect the work that sales managers do. I've been in your shoes, and I've worked with thousands of sales managers. I know how hard you work, and I know how much you care. You're going all out to do everything that you've been asked to do. At the very same time, I think it's virtually impossible to get the results you want doing more of the same that's already too much for any one person to do. So if I'm being a little rough on you here, it's because I want you to see the compelling case for making changes and for shifting to put people first. Let's just recap this laundry list of the 6 things employees want from their managers and from their companies. Here they are again. It's really, really hard to give people these 6 feelings and experiences if you're mired in the day-to-day. The deadlines, the revenue targets, the fires that you need to put out, the customer demands, the new products, the technology, all the changes. So if you're focusing on those things without carving out time and deliberately dedicating yourself to people-building activities, you won't be able to give people what they really want and need from you. And this is so important. It can be absolutely transformative for you and your organization. So I'm going to keep going here just a little bit deeper. I want to spend a bit more time explaining why this matters. I think it's only fair for you to know more of the reasons that compel the top sales managers to make these changes. A lot of it boils down to the extensive research over the past 5 years on employee engagement, one of those buzzwords that gets thrown around in business. So rather than letting this one get thrown around out there without understanding what it really means, here's an operating definition. I think this is a very good one. This particular definition has 2 key elements in it. First, employee engagement is a heightened emotional connection that an employee feels toward their organization. Oh, and there's that pesky word again. There are emotions involved. It's not just logic. And second, the second piece of the definition is that with that emotional connection, people are influenced to apply additional discretionary effort to their work. And when this happens, both part 1 and part 2, there's a really cool domino effect that you get. And I can give you any of the research behind this. I'm giving you the highlights here. But if you'd like to dive deeper into any of this, just get in touch with me because there are reams of research available. So here are the domino effects and how they play out. I'd like to start with the one that we've already been talking about, employee engagement. It's the second from the left. When you increase the level of the emotional commitment, of course, the next piece of the puzzle falls in place. You will do a better job of retaining your high potential, high PO talent. Your top sellers will stick around because they're emotionally committed. They're connected. And we also know that that connection triggers people to apply additional discretionary effort. From that, you get the next 3 pieces of the puzzle. And it only makes sense. It's common sense. When people apply additional discretionary effort, you get higher levels of productivity. That's more output, and it's better quality. Because of the emotional commitment, the fact that the top sellers are sticking around longer, and you have higher levels of quality, of course, the next thing you get is improved customer satisfaction. And with those things in place, now you've reduced the expenses associated with that constant hiring, for example. So you get both improved top-line revenue from your satisfied customers and your sellers who are sticking around. You reduce expenses on top of that, and that means that the bottom line, the profit margin, also improves. Every single bit of this is correlated directly to employee engagement, which means we really need to figure out what it is. What is it that causes people to be more engaged? How do you get better levels of employee engagement to unleash all these other impacts? And the answer to that question is the far left-hand puzzle piece. It's the one that you really should start with, and that's developing yourself as a leader, not as a manager. So management and leadership, they are 2 different things. Developing yourself to lead people is what causes employees to be more engaged. And I have to reiterate it, no matter what you want to accomplish in business, you will get there faster and you'll get there better with engaged employees. When your employees are engaged, you will be more successful, period. Part of our success in sales comes from loyal customers and repeat business. Employee engagement unlocks that for us too. So along with customer loyalty and repeat business, we also get more top-line revenue and significant improvements in profitability from employee engagement. That bottom line profit, it's the result of more revenue and better managed expenses as employees are more productive and as they stick around longer. So when you put all of this together, it adds up. It adds up to this simple fact. Putting people first will get you where you want to be as a sales manager, as a leader, and as an organization. I've given you a couple of tools in the attachments there. Be sure to download the one called the Employee Engagement Checklist for Sales Managers because it'll get you started. It'll give you simple, easy tasks that you can do every day, not time-consuming ones, but super simple ones that you can do every day that are already proven to increase the levels of employee engagement. Okay, now let's wrap up with a summary. And I'd like to invite you to make a commitment to yourself from something that you heard today, something that you can do differently, something that you can work on. For you, the first and the most important shift as a sales manager, the first shift to make is the passage from technical selling to leading with soft skills that develop people. We're going to talk in future workshops in this series about the number one most important soft skill that you'll need to master, and that's active listening. You can even join me today if you want to get started on this sooner. I'm conducting a communications webinar here on this channel, separate from this series, but perfectly relevant if you want some bonus learning. The reason that active listening is so important for effective management is that people won't believe the message if they don't believe the messenger. And they won't believe in you unless they know that you've tuned into them. Your credibility and your effectiveness are both wrapped up in your listening skills. Now, if any of the things we've talked about here today are contrary to what you've experienced in the past, please don't be alarmed. You're not alone in feeling that way. I'm reading the comments that several of you have posted here in the live session. Many managers, especially if you're in an industry where there's a crisis time, economic pressures, rapid change, volatility, if you've been pressured by any of those things into short-term thinking, then you might be in an industry where managers there haven't been trained to do things with a people building and a long-term perspective. But your focus on building people will make a real, tangible, measurable, and positive difference for you, for the team of sellers who report to you, for your clients, and ultimately for your business too. And you're going to see a whole lot of benefits when you make this kind of a shift, starting with improved rates of retention so that you won't have to spend as much time recruiting, hiring, and onboarding people. And as you continue through this series, we're also going to talk about sales coaching. You'll get some instruction on being a very effective sales coach so that you can continue to develop people. And as you're developing people, you're building people so that they can build the business and you can have the greatest possible long-term impact. We'll also be talking about sales culture in this program. People building is the foundation of a solid sales culture where people stick around and contribute to that culture. Now, at a minimum, I've given you a lot of action items here. At a minimum, be sure to enroll for the next presentation. Whether you're going to take me up on the certificate program or not, at least come back for the next presentation. That one will be about how to set expectations that motivate sales professionals. And in the attachments and links is a link where you can go and do that right away. I've given you an offer for the first 12 who sign up for it to come in and get the certificate program, all of it, not just the 12 webinars that everybody can access, but additional bonus tools and one-to-one coaching. And if you want to link up with me on LinkedIn, or if you want to come over to the website and subscribe to the Connect to Sell and Connect to Lead blogs, there are tons of ways that you can keep building on what we've talked about today. I've answered the questions that were posted for me. I've threaded in those answers as we went here. Last call, if you have any other questions and you're in the live session, post those now. Otherwise, you know that you can email me or find me on LinkedIn. I'm Deb Calvert, and if you have responses to the questions I've positioned for you today, feedback for me, I'd like you to post those here in the reviews or the questions, or I'd like you to connect with me and make sure that we get your questions answered. Thank you very much for coming in and listening to today's presentation.